Have you ever heard a woman whisper "Abang" in the middle of the jungle at night? If you have, you better pray you didn't answer. A young truck driver takes on what looks like a simple delivery job, but wading deep in the Malaysian forest isn't cargo. It's a creature older than myth, one that hunts men carrying pain they pretend doesn't exist. It all starts with a hammock, a voice in the dark, and a smile with no eyes. This is the story of a scar that never healed and why some silences should never be broken. Let's dive in, only here on Uncle Hollow NX. Shafiq wasn't a superstitious man. He believed in hard work, late nights, and taking whatever job paid enough to cover the mortgage, diapers, and the endless list of bills waiting back home in Klang. His baby daughter had just turned 3 months old. His wife was still recovering, and he was exhausted, broke, and desperate. So when a friend of a friend offered him a week-long cross-border haul, cash, paid in advance, triple his usual rate, Shafiq didn't ask questions. He just said yes. The job was simple, on paper. Drive a covered cargo truck across a designated forest route, drop the vehicle at a staging area near the Malaysian border, and walk away. No customs, no paperwork, no interaction. Just drive and disappear. The only catch? He wasn't driving alone. His co-driver, more like an escort, was a wiry, quiet man named Kamal. Local, mid-40s, face weathered like sun-dried wood. Spoke in clipped Malay and broken English, never smiled, and always kept a small string of wooden beads in his right hand. Even when he slept, the beads remained clenched between his fingers. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The first few days were uneventful. The truck was sluggish but solid. The road, though narrow, wasn't as treacherous as he had imagined. They'd camped near the edge of remote jungle patches, where the trees rose like cathedral spires and the canopy swallowed daylight whole by late afternoon. Kamal rarely spoke, but when he did, it was often strange. On the 5th night, just as the last light died behind the hills, Kamal stood by the truck, gazing silently into the darkening tree line. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Don't sleep under the truck tonight." Shafiq laughed it off. He'd done dozens of overnight deliveries across Malaysia, even into Thailand. Sleeping in the hammock beneath the truck, close to the earth, away from engine heat, was part of the routine. And besides, it was cooler down there. "Relax, brother," he chuckled. "Ghosts don't haunt broke men." Kamal didn't laugh. He stared at him, beads clicking faster in his hand. "Tonight, the forest watches." That should have been enough. But when you're exhausted, your logic softens. Shafiq set up his hammock between the chassis beams and tied it tight. The jungle's lullaby, a harmony of crickets, wind, and the occasional rustle, was oddly soothing. He lay there, one hand resting on his chest, the other under his head, eyes slowly drifting shut. Just one night, just a few hours. And then, somewhere out in the dark, a soft voice whispered, "Abang?" Shafiq's eyes snapped open. Was that Kamal? Another whisper, closer now, impossibly soft, "Abang." He turned his head. Standing just a few feet from his hammock, barefoot on the damp earth, was a woman. A young woman. A beautiful woman. Wearing traditional Khmer dress, her skin pale against the darkness, her eyes large, glistening, but blank. Her hair was tied in a tight bun, her lips painted in an old-fashioned shade of red, and somehow, despite the jungle mist and late-night drizzle, she wasn't wet. Not even a little.
By the time they hit the outer jungle route, daylight was nothing more than a fading memory. The sun had dropped behind the dense canopy long before Shafiq realized the road signs had stopped. No kilometer markers, no painted lines, just red clay winding endlessly between towering trees that seemed to lean in, like they were listening. The temperature fell fast, too fast. It wasn't the crisp chill of highlands. It was a damp, sticky cold, like moisture crawling under his clothes. Shafiq adjusted the air vents, turned down the fan, then checked the side mirror. Kamal was still awake, sitting straight in the passenger seat, rosary beads twitching softly in his fingers. He hadn't said a word in over an hour. "Feels like we're driving through someone's backyard," Shafiq muttered. Kamal didn't respond. The road narrowed, with thick foliage pushing close from both sides. Vines hung low, brushing the windshield. The radio signal had cut out long ago, replaced by intermittent static and the occasional foreign station bleeding through. Unfamiliar chants, distant flute music, then silence again. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt watched. They stopped at a small clearing just off the road, a patch of flattened earth with an old tree stump in the center. The sky above was a bruised purple, the last light gasping behind the trees. Kamal jumped out first. He walked to the edge of the clearing and just stood there, perfectly still, eyes locked in the jungle beyond. Shafiq turned off the ignition, grabbed a bottled water from the dash, and stepped out to stretch. His knees cracked, his shoulders ached. "We sleep here tonight?" he asked. Kamal said nothing. Shafiq took a long sip and looked up. The trees were swaying slightly, but there was no wind. "You see something?" Shafiq asked, a little sharper this time. Kamal finally spoke, but without turning. "This place is thin." "That thin?" "The line between us and them." Shafiq blinked. "Okay, look, I've done plenty of cross-border hauls, camped in way worse. Don't start this ghost talk on me now." Kamal turned slowly. His face was unreadable, but his fingers gripped the beads tighter. "This jungle doesn't care if you believe. It only cares if you stay." That should have been enough for Shafiq to rethink his routine, but fatigue was winning. His shoulders sagged, and the heavy heat pressed into his back like wet sandbags. "You sleep in the truck, I'll set up the hammock. I sleep better under the stars." Kamal stepped forward suddenly. "No, not tonight." The sharpness in his voice was so unlike him that Shafiq froze mid-step. Kamal walked past him, toward the rear of the truck. He opened a side compartment and pulled out a tightly wound bundle wrapped in faded batik cloth. He opened it slowly, revealing small jars of ash, crushed herbs, dried roots, and something that looked like carved bone. "You carry charms?" Shafiq asked, half mocking. "Protection from her." That word, her. It landed in Shafiq's ears like a cold nail. "Who's her?" Kamal didn't look up. "She doesn't have a name, only hunger." He pulled out a pinch of ash and walked around the truck in a slow circle, muttering under his breath. He sprinkled the ash in the soil with every step. Shafiq rubbed his temples. "Okay, I get it. You're one of those guys. Look, I respect your rituals, seriously, but I just need 4 hours of sleep. I can't crash sitting up." Kamal finished his circle, then returned to the cab. "Then sleep inside. Lock the doors. Do not go out. Do not answer anything you hear." Shafiq sighed. "Are you not going to tell me what's actually going on?" "No, because if I do, you won't sleep at all." Shafiq looked around the clearing one last time. The trees didn't sway anymore. The crickets had stopped. Even the flies had gone. It was dead quiet. Still, pride is a stubborn thing, and exhaustion even more so. He walked to the back of the truck, pulled out his hammock, and started tying it between two low-hanging branches. Kamal didn't stop him again. He just sat in the truck, staring straight ahead, whispering to the beads in his hand, over and over and over. The moment Shafiq lay back into the hammock, the air seemed heavier. His eyelids drooped quickly, breath slowing. He thought about his daughter, how her tiny hands always reached for his face when he cradled her. He thought about his wife, exhausted but smiling when he kissed her goodbye 2 nights ago. He thought about money, debts, all the reasons he had to be out here, in the middle of nowhere. And then, just before his mind slipped into unconsciousness, a voice, soft, feminine.
Abang.
The first time he heard it, he thought it was a dream. Abang! Soft, like a breath laced with perfume. It lingered in his ear, warm and close, closer than it had any right to be. Shafiq stirred in the hammock, one eye fluttering open, his breath caught halfway between sleep and waking. Silence. The jungle was a silhouette, trees like black fingers reaching skyward, unmoving. His body lay cradled in fabric, gently swaying. He turned his head slightly. There was no one there. Abang! Again. Clearer. Closer. Shafiq opened his eyes fully. The sky was dark, cloud cover hiding the stars. A pale mist rolled across the ground, hugging the earth like breath exhaled by the forest itself. And then, at the edge of the mist, where the light from the truck's side marker barely reached, he saw her. She stood just beyond the tree line, still, silent, watching. A young woman, early 20s perhaps, her skin light against the dark trees. Her dress, traditional Khmer, cream-colored with gold accents, was too pristine for the jungle. Her long black hair was tied in a bun high on her head, and her arms rested gently at her sides. But something wasn't right. Shafiq blinked hard. She wasn't blinking. She wasn't moving. And yet her mouth opened. Abang! This time, it didn't sound sweet. It sounded familiar, like someone pretending to know you. Shafiq tried to sit up, but the hammock tilted, forcing him to stabilize with both hands. The ropes creaked under his shifting weight. He turned to look at the truck. No light inside. Kamal was nowhere in sight. Maybe asleep? Maybe... No. He wasn't going to panic. Just a woman. A lost traveler? A local? He cleared his throat. Maaf, Cheek, siapa awak? She didn't answer. Didn't move. Suddenly, she was closer. No sound. No steps. Just closer. Now standing only 5 feet from him, her features clearer. High cheekbones, full lips, dark eyes. Still no blinking. Still no breath. Her skin was dry, too dry, like clay left under the sun for too long. Shafiq froze. She tilted her head, smiled, and without warning, stepped into the hammock shadow. His body tensed. She was beneath the trees now, barefoot on thick, damp soil. Still clean, still untouched. The mist coiled around her ankles, but left the rest of her untouched, like even the jungle knew to stay away. Abang! The way she said it this time, not affectionate, possessive, like he belonged to her. She took another step forward. Her eyes never left his. Her smile widened, just a little. Shafiq felt the air shift, heavy, dense, like breathing through wet cloth. He looked down. His hands, they were gripping the edges of the hammock tightly. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't respond. Then, she climbed into the hammock. No hesitation, no grace, just Movement. One knee up, the other followed. Then her full weight settled atop him, light but deliberate, her face inches from his, and now he could hear it, her breathing. It didn't match her expression. Her mouth was smiling, but her breath came ragged, desperate, like she'd just run miles. Shafiq's mouth opened to speak, but she pressed a finger to his lips. Cold, but not lifeless. Just wrong. Don't speak, Abang. Only feel. Her hand moved from his lips to his jawline, then along the side of his face. Her nails trailed behind like small blades, leaving behind goosebumps. And then her tongue. She leaned in, licked his cheek, once, slowly. The texture, coarse, like a cat's tongue dipped in sand. It scraped across his skin, not enough to cut, but enough to burn. He gasped. She giggled. I want to taste your sorrow. Something inside him snapped. Shafiq shoved with all his strength, pushing her upward, or trying to, but her body didn't budge. It was like pressing against wet concrete. Her face dropped again, this time to his neck, and licked. Harder. His skin flared with pain, and just like that, he felt it. Blood. Warm, tracing a line from under his ear down to his collarbone. He tried to scream, but the jungle swallowed it whole. She whispered again, this time directly into his ear. You're not the first, Abang, but maybe you'll stay longer. And with that, she grinned. Her mouth widened, not by muscles, but by force, as if invisible hands were stretching her smile from ear to ear, teeth revealed, not sharp, not rotten, but too many, too white, unnatural, unhuman. The last thing Shafiq saw before he passed out was her eyes. They weren't dark anymore. They were glowing white, empty, and endless.
Shafiq didn't know when exactly it changed. 1 second he was fighting her, hands pushing, voice cracking, legs flailing. And the next, he was still. Not calm, not safe, just numb. His body didn't feel like his anymore. Limbs heavy, heartbeat slow. It was as if her presence had wrapped itself around his thoughts, suffocating reason, drowning instinct. She lay on top of him in the hammock, impossibly light. Her hair now fell loose, grazing his cheeks like silk threads dipped in ice. Her breath, slow, rhythmless, fell across his skin like mist rising from a cold lake. Don't resist, she whispered, her voice no longer delicate. You brought this sadness with you. Let me take it. He wanted to scream, to call for Kamal, to run. But somewhere between the pain and the paralyzing weight pressing on his chest, something else bloomed, something far more dangerous than fear. Curiosity. Not of who she was, but why she felt so familiar. She touched his face with the back of her fingers, tracing his brow, his temple, his jaw. You carry too much, she said softly. Regret, shame. You left something behind, didn't you? Shafiq blinked. The words felt surgical, like she had opened a drawer inside his mind. He tried to look away. Her fingers gripped his chin and turned his gaze back to hers. Let me have it. Then her mouth descended again, this time onto his neck. The first lick had already broken skin. Now her tongue dug in. He could feel it,
coarse, not slick like human skin. It scraped along raw flesh, sending a jolt of agony and pleasure through his spine. His body twitched, but not from pain alone. Something stirred inside him, like her tongue was pulling emotions out from under his skin. And suddenly, memories, flashes. His wife crying alone in the hospital bed after labor while he answered job calls outside. His daughter wailing at 2 a.m. while he pretended to sleep. His own father's funeral, missed because of a delivery he couldn't delay. Each one clearer than it should have been. Her lips moved up to his ear. "See," she said, now whispering in English, "you didn't bury it. You just packed it away, like cargo." Shafiq's throat tightened. Tears welled in his eyes, uninvited, unwelcome. And she smiled, a genuine smile, one that, for a split second, made her look human. Men like you always think they can outrun grief. She cupped the side of his face, gently, almost lovingly, and pressed her forehead to his. The moment their skin touched, the jungle around them seemed to fade. The sounds, the wind, the trees, even his own heartbeat became distant. They were floating in something else now, a silence beyond silence. Then her tone changed. "I don't want your grief, Abang. I want your will." Before he could process what that meant, her hand dropped to his chest, fingers spread wide, palm flat. He felt pressure, real pressure, as if she were pushing straight into his lungs. His chest convulsed, breath staggered, eyes rolled. "Stop!" he gasped. "Shh," she whispered. "Let go." Her eyes locked on his, and for the first time she noticed they weren't entirely white. In the center, barely visible, were two tiny pinpricks of red, burning, watching. Suddenly, a voice cut through, not hers, not his, but Kamal's. From somewhere above, distant but rising fast, chanting, louder than before, more desperate, more commanding. The words struck the air like stones, and she flinched. Her head jerked, eyes narrowing. She hissed, not like a snake, but like a boiling kettle, high and sharp and unnatural. Kamal's chanting grew louder. The truck door slammed. Footsteps pounded the ground. She turned back to Shafiq, fury written across her now twisting features. "He doesn't get to take you," she growled. Her hands moved up. One gripped his throat, the other clutched his jaw. Shafiq gasped. His body flailed once more, instincts reawakening. "You don't belong to him," she shrieked. Then her face changed again, not gradually, instantly, like a mask pulled off. Her skin cracked around the mouth, her lips peeled back, her jaw dislocated and dropped farther than human anatomics should allow. And in the dark of that widening maw, Shafiq saw nothing but shadows, crawling, writhing shapes like insects made of smoke reaching for him. "No!" he choked, and just then the hammock snapped. He hit the ground hard. Above him, Kamal stood, blade in hand, beads clutched to his chest, his mouth still moving in urgent rhythm. The jungle wind returned with a howl, a sudden, furious gust. Dust kicked up, leaves swirled, and when Shafiq looked back, she was gone. All that remained was a trail of blood across his neck and a faint echo of a whisper. Abang.
Shafiq lay on the forest floor, face tilted sideways, cheek pressed into wet soil. His ears rang. His chest felt like it had been stomped by a bull. Every muscle screamed, but what hurt most wasn't physical. It was the smell. Not blood, not sweat, not rot. It was her, the faint perfume of wilted jasmine, burnt wood, and copper, still hanging in the air like the echo of a scream. Kamal stood over him, blade trembling in one hand, his other clenching the prayer beads so tight his knuckles were white. "Jangan pandang belakang," Kamal rasped. "Don't look behind." But Shafiq did, and she was still there, just beyond the trees. Not a figure anymore, not human. She no longer wore a dress, no longer glided like silk on air. Her arms had stretched, too long, bones bent at wrong angles. Her fingers clawed the bark of a nearby tree. Her skin had turned the color of old parchment, torn in places, raw, pulsing like something still becoming. And her mouth, God, her mouth. It wasn't just open, it was unhinged. Lower jaw dangling like a broken hinge, dislocated, gaping wide enough to swallow a melon whole. And inside, teeth. Too many. In layers, small, thin, needle-like, like she'd grown them just for him. She wasn't a woman. She never was. She was hunger, given shape. Shafiq scrambled backward, legs slipping in mud, his palms leaving blood smears across the dirt. "She can't follow," Kamal barked. "We're inside the line." Shafiq looked down. Ash. A broken ring of gray powder circled them, faint, disrupted where the hammock snapped, but still there, still holding. The creature crouched, watching him, its head tilted, and then it spoke. "You showed me your heart, Abang." The voice was no longer soft. It layered over itself, like two voices playing slightly out of sync. "I want to wear it." Then she moved. Not walked, leapt, straight into the air, vanishing above the trees with an inhuman shriek that curdled the sky. Silence again. Kamal dropped to his knees, hands trembling. "It's not over," he said. "She'll come again." "What the hell is she?" Shafiq croaked. Kamal looked up, face pale, eyes glassy. "She's not a hunt too, not a ghost. She's older, something that lives in the grief of men who lie to themselves." "Lie about what?" "That they're fine." Shafiq didn't respond. His heart pounded, not just from fear, but because those words stabbed deeper than claws ever could. He was not fine, hadn't been in years, but in a culture of stoicism and grit, in a life of deadlines and deliveries, he never had time to say it or space to feel it. Until now. Until she pulled it to the surface. Kamal pulled out a small cloth and began cleaning the blood from Shafiq's neck. "You were lucky," he said quietly. "This is lucky? Most men don't walk away. Not once she drinks." "She drinks?" Kamal nodded. "Not blood, emotion, will, memory." Shafiq felt cold. "That thing has a name?" Kamal hesitated, then answered. "Locals call her Sundel Api."
the fire widow. She finds men who burn silently, men whose guilt is just loud enough for her to hear. Then she shows them what they've buried. Shafiq stared at the broken ropes, the torn hammock, the red-stained earth. "She tasted everything," he whispered. "And she'll want more," Kamal said. They stood in silence as the wind picked up, lifting a thin swirl of ash from the circle around them. Above, a crow cried once, then was gone. Shafiq wiped his face. His fingers came away red, but it wasn't just blood. It was something else. A trail, a mark, burned into him by something that should not exist. "You asked me why she came," Kamal said, breaking the quiet. "I didn't," Shafiq replied. "You will."
The forest held its breath. Nothing moved, not a leaf, not a bird, not the clouds overhead. Shafiq sat on a flat rock, shirt torn at the shoulder, skin slick with sweat and blood. The ground beneath him was cold and wet. The kind of cold that sinks past your skin, deep into your bones. Kamal sat opposite him, cross-legged, eyes closed, beads in hand. He hadn't spoken since Sundel Api vanished into the trees. Shafiq wanted to ask if it was really over, but his lips refused to move. His mind was spinning, his thoughts fractured. He still felt her. Not around him. Inside. Kamal's chant broke the silence. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Each line rolled out like waves, deep, rhythmic, measured. Not loud, but certain. His hands moved slowly, as if tracing invisible lines in the air, while his voice anchored something older than the forest itself. Shafiq stared at him, mesmerized. "What are you doing?" he whispered. Kamal opened his eyes. "Rebinding the boundary. You broke the circle. She tasted you. Now she's marked you." "So that's it? She'll come back?" Shafiq asked. Kamal nodded. "She always comes back, unless we cut the cord." That phrase made Shafiq shiver. "How?" Kamal reached into his bag and pulled out a small bottle, carved from blackened wood with strange symbols etched into its surface. Inside, a thick liquid, dark green, nearly black. "This is minyak pingikat, binding oil. It doesn't trap her, it separates you." "What if I don't want to forget?" Shafiq asked, surprising even himself. Kamal paused. "Then you better be stronger than she is, because she remembers everything." They worked fast. Kamal instructed Shafiq to remove his shirt and sit cross-legged on the ground. The cold hit him instantly, making his muscles twitch. Kamal took the oil and began to draw lines on his back, along the spine, the shoulder blades, the base of the neck. The scent of the oil was overwhelming, citrusy and burnt, like orange peels left in fire. Each touch from Kamal's fingers was like a spark, tiny electric shocks that made Shafiq's skin tighten. "Close your eyes," Kamal said. He obeyed. "Repeat after me." The prayer was in Jawi, foreign, ancient but melodic. The syllables rolled off his tongue awkwardly at first, but as he repeated each line, something inside him shifted. The jungle didn't feel closer anymore. It felt listening, watching, waiting.
Then came the knife, small, curved, ceremonial. Kamal held it carefully, like a sacred relic. "This part will hurt." Before Shafiq could ask, Kamal pressed the blade just beneath his left collarbone, a shallow cut, no deeper than a scratch. Still, Shafiq winced as blood beaded along the wound. Kamal dipped his thumb into it, then pressed it into the center of Shafiq's forehead. "This is the severing," Kamal said. "She'll feel it." And she did, instantly. A scream tore through the jungle, not from above, not from behind, from everywhere. The trees shook, the wind slammed into them, birds exploded from branches, crying wildly into the sky, and the air, it grew hot, suffocating, stifling, like a fever-made wind. Shafiq clutched his head, her voice in his skull. "No! You're mine! You gave yourself to me!" He fell forward, knees digging into the earth. Kamal stayed calm. "Hold the prayer." Shafiq tried. The words scrambled, his breath shattered. But he held, through the heat, through the pain, through her. And then, silence. Total, crushing silence, followed by a single gust of wind, cool, gentle, and clean. Shafiq opened his eyes. The trees stood still. The blood had stopped dripping. The oil on his back had dried. Kamal helped him up. "Is she gone?" Shafiq whispered. Kamal looked toward the horizon, the faint glow of dawn beginning to break. "For now, her thread to you is cut, but she'll look for others." "Others like me?" Kamal nodded. "Men who lie to themselves, who carry guilt like gifts. She doesn't need to hunt them. They walk straight to her." Shafiq didn't answer. He looked down at his hands, stained, trembling, human, but changed. Everything inside him felt different, not healed, but exposed, as if every sorrow he'd buried had been pulled to the surface. He wasn't just afraid anymore. He was aware. Kamal broke the moment. "We leave now. Never speak of this to anyone who hasn't seen her." "Why?" "Because they'll either mock you or go looking for her themselves." They packed in silence. By the time they started the truck, the sun had fully breached the tree line. Morning birds chirped, the air was fresh again. But the scar on Shafiq's chest burned, a low, steady throb. He didn't look back, not at the trees, not at the blood-soaked dirt, not at the hammock rope still twisted around the branch, now blackened and brittle.
It had been 2 weeks. 2 weeks since the jungle. 2 weeks since the whisper. 2 weeks since Shafiq came face to face with something no man should ever meet, and lived. But in truth, only half of him came back. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror of his apartment in Klang. His wife and daughter were asleep in the next room, the soft sound of the baby monitor blinking quietly on the sink. The fluorescent light flickered once, buzzing softly. He peeled back the bandage. The scar was still there. It started just below his left earlobe and curved up toward the edge of his temple, a single, precise line, dark and raised like a fingerprint. But it wasn't just the look of it. It was the feeling. It pulsed. Not constantly, but at night, especially when he was alone. The doctors didn't understand. "Looks like a deep scratch," they said. "Maybe a tool accident? Rusted metal? Keep it clean, apply ointment, it'll fade in time." They didn't see how it changed color in the dark, how it warmed when the wind blew a certain way, or how, some nights, he'd wake up drenched in sweat, his daughter still asleep beside him, and hear the faintest sound in his left ear. "Abang." He tried to forget. He stopped answering Kamal's calls. He threw out the oils,
tossed the prayer beads Kamal had left him in the glove compartment. He even tried telling himself it was a hallucination, that he dozed off too hard in the jungle, mixed fear with fever. But lies only work when you want to believe them, and Shafiq knew better now. He knew truth has a shape, and he wore it on his face. One evening he drove to the coast, a quiet pier far from the city, where the only sounds were water and gulls. He stood at the edge, watching the sun set behind dark waters. He pulled out his phone and opened his gallery. Photo after photo. His wife, his baby girl, his old delivery truck, a bowl of laksa, his mother smiling in front of the family house. Then, a selfie. Taken accidentally, maybe, in a motel mirror. There he was, shirtless, holding a towel. And in the reflection, just over his shoulder, the faint silhouette of a woman near the bathroom doorway. She had no face, only hair, and a smile that curved beyond the frame. He deleted the photo, but the image didn't leave. It burned itself behind his eyelids, permanent. He went to see a therapist the next week. Didn't say ghost, didn't say curse, didn't say, I met a demon in the jungle. He just said, I saw something. It made me realize I'm not okay. The therapist asked why. Shafiq paused, then said, because I've spent my whole life outrunning things I refuse to carry, but the jungle made me stop, and it asked me to look. The therapist nodded, didn't press, just let him sit. And for the first time in a long time, Shafiq let himself feel. At night, he no longer slept in silence. He played soft Quran recitations on loop, not out of fear, but because silence now had a voice, and that voice remembered him. The scar never faded. It darkened slightly, turned more gray than red, but it stayed, and he stopped hiding it. He no longer covered it with bandages or grew his beard to mask it. He let it be, because it was a mark of truth, of survival, and of reminder that sometimes the things we bury deepest are the ones that come looking for us.
It wasn't just about the scar anymore. It was about questions, and Shafiq had too many. Why him? Why that night? Why did she know so much about his guilt? And most importantly, why did it still feel like she hadn't left? 3 weeks after the incident, Shafiq took a drive, alone. Not to escape, but to return. Not to the same road, not that exact forest, but close. He remembered something Kamal had said in passing between chants. There's an old surau near the first bend in the forest before the trees get too tall. If you're not ready to face her, speak to him. Shafiq didn't ask who him was. But now his hands gripped the wheel tight, eyes locked on a crooked wooden sign. Masjid Lama al-Haq. Old, abandoned, faded green walls, paint flaking off like dry skin. But the door was open, and someone was sweeping the steps. He parked, got out, and approached slowly. The man sweeping was in his 60s, white juba, hands weathered, face calm but unreadable. Before Shafiq could speak, the man looked up and said, "You're marked." Shafiq froze. "You can see it?" The man nodded. "It's not on your skin. It's in your walk." They sat together on the floor inside the mosque. The sun filtered through the lattice windows, casting patterned shadows across the rug. The man didn't ask for Shafiq's story, didn't need to. He just said, "You met her." Shafiq nodded. "She didn't kill me." "No, she doesn't always want death." Then what? The man took a breath. She wants those who suffer in silence, who pretend they're whole, men who carry guilt like a second spine. Shafiq looked down at his hands. I didn't think anyone would care. That's the point, the man said gently. She chose you because you stopped caring. About yourself. Silence. Then why now? Shafiq asked. Why that night? The old man stood slowly, walked to a dusty shelf and pulled down a book, thick, leather-bound, brittle from age. He opened it, revealing old hand-drawn maps, sketches of spirits, sigils, and regional myths. He pointed to one illustration, a woman with a melted face, long hair, and a necklace of teeth. She awakens when the forest takes more than it gives, when men come into the land thinking they own it and leave their sins behind. She isn't a ghost. No, she's a reminder. Shafiq leaned closer. A reminder of what? That pain doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. The old man closed the book and turned to him fully. Tell me, what were you running from that night? Shafiq's lips parted, but no words came. So the man continued. Wife? Baby? Work? Your father's death? Shafiq flinched. The man smiled, not cruelly, but knowingly. Ah, that one. He looked Shafiq in the eye. You never forgave yourself, did you? Shafiq shook his head. I missed his burial. I was working, delivering couches like that mattered. And you never grieved? No time. So it stayed inside. Shafiq's voice dropped to a whisper. And she found it. The old man nodded. She always does. Before Shafiq left, the man gave him a small scroll, wrapped in banana fiber, tied with red thread. Keep this, not to protect you, but to remind you. Of what? That the jungle has rules, and so does grief. If you break either, you call her. That night, Shafiq returned home. He kissed his wife longer than usual, held his daughter tighter than usual, and when he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he didn't reach for headphones, didn't block out the silence. He listened, not to the wind, not to the night, but to himself. And for the first time, the voice inside wasn't hers.
It's been 5 months. The scar never faded. It changed color, sometimes gray, sometimes red, sometimes a pale white that glows faintly under certain lights. But it stayed. No ointment, no procedure, no treatment could erase it. Shafiq had stopped trying, because the scar wasn't the problem. It was the reminder that he had survived something he couldn't explain, and that part of him never left the forest. He returned to driving, but never cross-border, never at night. He made fewer trips, spent more time at home. He'd cook dinner, take his daughter on walks, pray at Maghrib without rush. No one ever asked about the scar, not directly. Some clients stared a little longer. Some friends tried to joke, "Teluka jato cinta ka?" But Shafiq always smiled and never answered. Because how do you explain that you met something in the dark and it knew you better than you know yourself? Once a month, he'd light a small incense stick, not for religious reasons, just because the scent, sandalwood with a touch of burnt sugar, reminded him of her. Not her as the monster, but her as what she represented. All the guilt, all the secrets, all the nights he told himself, "I'm fine." Sometimes in the early hours of morning, that liminal space before light returns, he would feel a heat along the scar. It would pulse once, twice, then stop. A small whisper from his past, not to haunt him, but to remind him,
You're still here. One night, during a power outage, he sat on the floor beside his daughter's crib. She stirred in her sleep, and without thinking, he whispered, "Whatever follows me stops here." It wasn't a prayer. It was a decision. Weeks later, he received a letter. No return address. Just a folded paper inside, written in clean, looping script. You cut the thread, but some threads fray again. Speak your truth before it knots. No name, no signature, just a faint imprint of ash on the corner. He burned the letter. Didn't call Kamal, didn't drive to the jungle. He just stood in front of his bathroom mirror, touched the scar, and whispered, "Not today." The jungle hadn't left him, but it didn't own him either, because the moment you speak your sorrow aloud, you starve the thing that feeds on silence. Some pain doesn't bleed, and some monsters don't need to chase you. They wait for the right night, the right silence, the right man. This isn't just a ghost story. It's a psychological allegory about how modern men are taught to bury their pain, ignore their grief, and smile through the storm. But what happens when that silence becomes too loud? Sundel Api, the demon in our story, feeds not on blood, but on repressed sorrow. She doesn't haunt the weak. She finds the strong ones, the ones holding everything in, the ones who don't even know they're breaking. Shafiq survived a supernatural encounter, but what he really faced was himself, his regrets, his guilt, his silence. That's what this story is about. Not ghosts, but the dangerous idea that I'm fine. The real horror, not knowing that what's haunting you lives inside you. So if you've been carrying too much, if you've been pretending too long, maybe this is your whisper in the jungle. Not to scare you, but to remind you your silence is not your strength, and someone or something is always listening. If you made it this far, thank you, not just for watching, but for feeling the weight of this story. Now it's your turn. Have you ever felt haunted by something you couldn't name? A memory? A regret? A silence too loud to ignore? Would you dare enter that forest knowing it listens to your sadness? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. What would you do if the scar never healed? And if this story gave you chills, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because next week's story, let's just say, the jungle isn't the only thing that remembers.